Hello and welcome to the HTML5 lecture series at SNHU. I'm Tom Adamson, visiting professor, and this is lecture 20 on jQuery. Good grief, lecture 20 already. Let me get my noodle wet here, try some of my coffee. Is that a commercial for Starbucks? And I'm not going to wear my my sunglasses today, because I've gotten some email back and they didn't like the sunglasses. I'm going to get my notes here, and we're going to talk about jQuery. It is a lowercase j with a capital Q. And of course, a person over here might be saying what jQuery is. They might say that, that jQuery is a JavaScript library. And of course, that person that's saying that, generally people that say that will look something like this when they're saying it. That's an informed person. And also they might say that jQuery greatly simplifies JavaScript programming. They might also say that. So what we see about jQuery is a JavaScript library, and jQuery greatly simplifies JavaScript programming. And by the way, jQuery is used by gazillion users. Okay, so let's look at this now. Let's ask ourselves, what is a JavaScript library? You may recall the lecture we had on the advantages of object-oriented programming. A JavaScript library is a document with pre-coded programming upon which you can build, B-U-I-L-D, your JavaScript code. So basically what it is that, like if I say, here's the browser, here's your web browser, and here's the user side, this is what the user sees, here is the web page, and over here these are your web documents that are coming in from the cloud. Okay, here's the cloud over here, the internet. Okay, one of your web documents, of course, is a .html document that gives instructions to the browser, which produces the web page. The other document that's coming in can be a JavaScript library, .js. It'll have the extension .js. Both of these documents are nothing more than pure text. That's all they are. The thing that's different is their extensions. This document here, this is the library. Say my jQuery library. This library is called in by code up here in my HTML document. And then I can add JavaScript code to this, to my HTML document, that will use the advantages of the jQuery library, giving me a really cool and dynamic web page for the user. A really cool experience. So these are my, my super notes. And if you remember how we included that in the HTML document, what we did is we used something like this. We used script. We used this kind of an element. We used a script element. And we had src, system resource connection, is equal to wherever we wanted that file. .js, like that. script. So this was a script element, and then we put a end tag here for script. And this was located up on our head element in the HTML file. Okay, let's look and see what JavaScript, what jQuery, let's see what jQuery can do. There's no sense in going through all this stuff unless you have an idea of what it can do. And if I gave examples of everything it could do, this lecture would run a couple hours. And of course, we like to keep our lectures to around 30 minutes if we can. Okay, so let's see what it can do. What's so cool about jQuery? First of all, it has effects. Effects that it can do on my web page. What it can do, it can hide and it can show elements. And we all know what web elements are. So any web element that I have on my HTML document, it can hide it or it can show it with the user click of the button or something like that. The other thing it can do, it can fade in, fade out elements. And it can do this over time, or it can do it quickly. The other thing it can do, it can slide elements. So I can take any HTML element, could be a paragraph element, could be an H1 element, could be a table element. I could slide it across the screen and time it, and this is an element too. The other thing it can do is that it can animate. It can animate elements. It could take, for example, a picture and make like a picture show. It could make like a slideshow. It could make like a PowerPoint presentation. The other thing it can do, it can stop. Of course, if I'm animating something, there might be a point where I want to stop it. I can make it do that too. It can also do what's called callback. Callback, what callback means is that it will run only when current effect is finished. And you might say, well, why is callback such a big deal? Well, the thing is, if I'm going to use animation, I might have an animation happening on my web page. And when you write JavaScript, it's one line of code after the other. So the first line of code that says, hey, do this really cool animation, the animation's being done, it'll automatically go to the next line of code. If that next line of code starts executing something else that's going to mess up the animation, that's not cool. So what I need to have is I need to have during the animation a callback function that says when the animation is complete, then go to the next JavaScript function. Okay, go to the next line of JavaScript code and then do that. So that's why a callback is so important. The other thing that it has in terms of effects, it has chaining. And what chaining allows me to do is I can run multiple jQuery methods on the same element. What that means is that I might want it so that I have an image, and I want it so when you click on the image enlarges, and you can now see it bigger. I may also want it so that the initial image, which we call a thumbnail, might be in black and white. And when you click on it, besides it enlarging, I'd like to see it go from black and white and gradually morph into color. So that's called chaining. So I can have multiple things happen to any HTML element that I want through chaining. And that's one of the cool things that jQuery can do. Okay, that's in terms of effects. This is just the beginning of what jQuery can do. Hide show elements, fade in, fade out elements, slide elements, animate elements, stop, can do a callback, and do chaining. Okay? The other thing it can do, it can work with HTML elements themselves. You might say, wait a minute, I thought you already said that. No, well, let me give you an idea here. What it can do, it can get any HTML element in the web document, look at it and see what it's doing. And based upon that, then it can make some changes. It can set any HTML element. In other words, effectively construct a web page while you're looking at the web page. It can add elements. It can remove elements. As a matter of fact, you go to some websites and it'll allow you to create your own website, and you're doing it through a browser. What do you think they're using? They're using jQuery to make that happen. Okay. The other thing it can do CSS classes. It can add classes, it can add them, and it can remove them. And remember, in our last lecture, we talked about CSS classes, a class, because that was a CSS selector was a class. So it can remove them, and it can also toggle classes. It can do almost anything with cascading style sheets. And it can go and get dimensions of objects. And it can also do AJAX. You might say, wait a minute, we never talked about AJAX. Well, AJAX stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Now, we had a lecture on XML. Well, effectively, what AJAX does, it can get information or give information to the server without having to refresh the whole web page. And what it can do with AJAX is that it can load information from the server and it can post information on the server. So those are the major things that jQuery can do. And if I had to code this without jQuery, it'd take a lot of coding, and I have to use a lot of the DOM, a lot of the document object model. So we have, for HTML, get, set, add, remove, CSS classes where I can add them, rename them, toggle it. I can do CSS stuff, I can get dimensions, I can do AJAX, I can load, and I can post. Pretty cool thing, jQuery. Now, you might be asking yourself, wow, with all that, jQuery must cost a fortune. And there might be a person here that would ask that question, how much, and they probably be wearing glasses, how much does jQuery cost? And there might be a young lady here that's asking that. And here's how much it costs. jQuery is free to use. You can use it for any purpose that you want, commercial version or you name it. You might say, well, why haven't I heard about jQuery before? The reason why is it doesn't advertise because it doesn't have a budget for advertising. So all these proprietary programs that you might buy or editors that you might buy, they may be using jQuery and charging you for the editor that uses it. You can just download it and use it for free. That's what I'll show you how to do in this lecture. Okay, I need to go back to my academic notes here. And let me see what it can do. Okay, I got that. Now, where can I get jQuery? You can get jQuery from two ways. You can get it from the jQuery website. That's one place. And the other place you can get it from a CDN. And if you recall what a CDN is, that's a Content Developer Network. CDN. What I'd like to do first is let's look at a CDN. Let's look at a Content Development Network. And in order to do that, let's go on the screen. Let's stay on the screen, and then I'll sit down and I'll type something on the screen, and we'll see, hopefully we'll be able to see what it is that I'm typing. I'm going to open up a browser here. Of course, my favorite browser is Google Chrome. And I'm going to type something in, and what I'm going to type in is Google space jQuery. And I'll write it up on the board so you can see it better. And then I'm going to make this larger. That's what I get. If I type in Google jQuery, right up here at the top, Google jQuery, stay on the screen, that's what I typed in. And what I'll get are libraries for Google developers, and I'm looking here at libraries. And that's what I want to click on. The Google hosted libraries is a content distribution network for, and that's what I'm going to click on next. So stay on the screen there, please. I'm going to try and zoom in some more. And what I want to look at is over here on the right. Available libraries. And what I see is, holy mackerel, where's jQuery? There's jQuery right there. Look, there's other libraries too. There's AngularJS, there's Chrome Frame, there's Dojo, ext core, jQuery, jQuery UI, MooTools, prototype script, this and then this. And you might say, are all these libraries? Yes, they are. And you might say, well, why haven't I heard about these libraries? Because They're free. That's why you haven't heard about them. And they don't have an advertising budget. The one that we're interested in is jQuery. So we're going to stay on the screen here and see what happens when I click on jQuery. I'm coming here and I click on jQuery. And what I see when I click on jQuery, I see this way at the top. And this is the line of code that I'm interested in. It says script, src, and that's where it's located. It's located up here at Google. And this, what I can do is I can copy this right here and paste it into my HTML document that I'm creating, and now it'll always have access to all the jQuery functions. It'll have access to the library, which is up on a content development network, which happens to be Google's. That's one way of doing it. Okay, we're going to stay on the screen. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the jQuery website, jQuery.com. And here I am on the jQuery website, and what I see, it's telling me, write less, do more for jQuery. It says it has a lightweight footprint, which means that the file size of the jQuery document is small. Is CSS3 compliant? We haven't talked about CSS3 yet, but that just means it's even better. Cross-browser, that means it works on all the different browsers. And now I can download jQuery, and if I click here, what I see is this. And let me explain to you what I see here. I see I have some download options. I have download the compressed production jQuery, and there's the version number. Download the uncompressed development jQuery, and there's the version number. Now, let's look at the difference between the production version and the development version. And we'll come here to the board. Come here to the board. The production version. The production version, this is for your live website. Because it has been minified, M-I-N-I-F-I-E-D, and compressed. To make the file size smaller. You might say, what is minified? Minified means that all the JavaScript code, all the unnecessary stuff has been removed from the code. Compressed means all the spaces have been taken out. Now we're going to go back to the screen, and I'm going to show you on the screen what that version looks like, what the production version looks like. I'm going to click on it, and look at that. I mean, this has really been. I can't even read it. I'm going to try and enlarge it if I can. But effectively, all the spaces have been removed, all the unnecessary stuff's been removed, and it's not something that I can read, but it's something that I could use. So I'm going to scroll back out of this, staying on the screen. I'm going to come back here. Now I'm going to look at the uncompressed, the development version, and let's see what the development version does. Okay. This is the development version. The development version, this is for testing and development, as you might expect. development. It's uncompressed, and actually you can take this and you could read the code and hopefully understand it, and you could actually modify it. So let's go back on the screen now, and then we'll look at the development version and see what that looks like. Okay, here's the development. Now, if I look at the development version, this code has not been minified and hasn't been compressed. I can read it. There's a lot of code here to read. So as you can see, jQuery has had a lot of coding done to it, but this is code that I could actually modify if I wish to do it. So what I want to do is I want to make it so that I can use the compressed version. So in order to use that, I'm going to click on it. There it is. I'm going to do a Control-A to select all of it, and I'm going to do a Control-C to copy all of it. Then I'm going to come here and I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to come here to a folder. I made a folder called HTML5 Lecture 20. I'm going to right-click on that folder and use my favorite editor, which happens to be Notepad. I'm going to call this jQuery. I could actually call it anything. Let me come in here and try and make it larger. It says new document text. Let me go ahead and rename it. I'm going to call it jQuery. And I'm going to remove the extension .txt, and I'm going to put .js. And I hit the Enter key, and it gives me a warning, and I say yes. And now I'm going to open this, left click, and I'm going to do a Control-V to paste. And now I'm going to come here, File, and Save. And what I've done now, I'm going to stay on the screen. I now have downloaded to my desktop everything I need for jQuery. This is the whole jQuery library. I could have named it anything I wanted to. So I took that code off the site, I copied it, and then I pasted it, and I used Notepad. The next thing, the only other thing I have to do now is use an HTML document that calls this, and I can start writing jQuery code. Okay, let's go back to the board here, please. I'll get my super duper notes here and see where I am. Let's look at the jQuery syntax. The jQuery syntax, jQuery is made for selecting which means to query. That's why it's called, they could have called it JSelect, I guess. Query HTML elements. And performing some kind of action on them. So basically, jQuery is made for selecting or querying an HTML element and then performing some kind of action. So in my jQuery syntax, I have to tell it what element that I want to select, what's the element I want to select, and then what's the action that I want on that element. Do I want to hide it? Do I want to make it larger? Do I want to move it? Do I want to animate it? Do I want to modify it? So there's two things in the syntax. And let's see what it looks like. the basic syntax of all jQuery instructions look like this. Starts with a $sign. You might say, that's weird. You mean this has to do with money? No. This just tells the browser that, hey, dude, what's following here is jQuery. This is the selector. Then there's a dot, and this is the action. This right here, so this is the basic syntax. What it is I'm selecting, and then what action do I want to have upon it. And so this right here must be inside a script element. Keeping in mind that this is JavaScript, it must be inside a script element on my HTML document. Okay, so let's look at what this $sign means. This defines jQuery. The selector, this right here, finds or selects the HTML element. And then this right here, the dot action, defines the action to be taken on that element. Okay, so the basic syntax is $, selector, and then dot action. And it has to go inside the script element and the HTML document. The $sign defines that this is jQuery. The selector finds or selects the HTML element. And the action defines the action to be taken on that selected HTML element. We'll give a few examples before we wrap up this lecture. Okay? Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is something, and have the years that I've taught jQuery, that is a little bit confusing to students, and so I'd like to take some time and explain what the deal is here. There is what's called a document ready event. And basically what it looks like is this. It's a jQuery, and it's called, in here, I'm looking at the whole document. This is the element I'm looking at, is the whole document. And the action I want it to be ready. And what I want inside here is a function. Hey, well, let me close this door here. I'll be right back. So what I have to do for the document ready event is I'm going to use the whole document. It's got to be ready, and this is what it's got to be ready to do. It's going to have a function in here, and the function, this is going to start the body of the function, and then I'm going to have my jQuery methods here. And then it's going to end the function and end the argument. Here's what this does. When I'm downloading an HTML document, I don't want to have any of my jQuery stuff start doing things. Because if the document hasn't finished downloading and the jQuery stuff starts doing something, it may wind up not doing what I expect it to do. So I always start my jQuery statements with this document ready function. And I put my jQuery statements inside here. So none of the jQuery statements get executed until everything in the document has been downloaded. So what this does, this prevents jQuery from running until the whole HTML document downloads. Okay, so we're going to be using this syntax when we start writing our jQuery methods. And the reason why we're doing it is to make sure that the whole document is downloaded before we start implementing the jQuery. Okay. All right, so let's see what else I have on my academic notes here. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about are jQuery selectors. And these jQuery selectors really means how jQuery knows what HTML elements to select. And if you recall, the last lecture that we had was on CSS selectors. And jQuery uses the same selectors as we did in CSS. So one of the first selectors we have are the elements. An element selector. And if you recall what an element selector was, that might be P for paragraph, body for body, H1 for the H1 element, and so on. So that's an element selector. The other kind that I have an ID selector. And if you recall, an ID selector was an attribute inside an HTML element. I could have paragraph and I could have ID is equal to, say, P1 for paragraph 1. And that's in my opening tag. Then I have my content here, and there's my closing tag for the paragraph. So this one here would use the ID selector. And when I use that, I have to have a pound sign and then P1. You recall the pound sign indicated in cascading style sheets that this was an ID selector. The other thing I can have is a class selector. And if you recall, if I had a paragraph here, I would have class. This would be an attribute. Keep in mind, attributes are always value pairs. I could call it my stuff. And this would be in the opening paragraph tag. This would be any content I wanted. This would close it. And remember that in order to access that, I needed a dot and then my class. The dot ahead of the identifier indicates that it's a class identifier. So there are more selectors in jQuery than just these, but these are the only ones we'll be covering for this particular lecture. Future lectures, we can look at all of them, or else you can go and Google them and see what they are. Okay. So those are the three class selectors that we're going to be using to select particular HTML elements. Okay, now let's see. All right, what I would like is for us to go on the screen there, please, and I'm going to give some examples of using jQuery. Give a few examples. I'm going to make a HTML document. I'm going to right-click, use my favorite editor, which of course is Notepad, and I'm going to call this example Whoops, I hit the caps key. And I'm going to come here and do .html. Gives me a warning. I type Y for yes, and now it looks like a web document. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to right-click on it, and I'm going to open with Notepad, my favorite editor. And I'm going to start off with a doc type. Let's start off with a doc type. Whoops. And the doc type is going to be HTML. That really means that what follows is an HTML5 document, okay? And then I'm going to have here HTML. That's my root element, the opening tag for my root element. I'm going to have here head, okay? Then I'm going to have here the title so that search engines can find me. And I'll have, we'll call it a jQuery, jQuery example. And that'll end my title element. There's my closing tag. And now what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to have my script element. SCRIPT, SRC. And I'm going to attach now, let me move this down here. See my jQuery document right here? Okay. I'm going to now attach that into my HTML document, and it's going to be jQuery.js. And this is the one that does the magic. And I have to close that in quotation marks. Then I come over here and I close it. Okay, so that takes care of the linking. So now what I need to do is I need to put more script here. I need to put another script element, because here's where I'm going to put my jQuery script. Between this script opening tag and this script closing tag. That's another script element. Now what I have to do is I have to close out the head. And then I need to open the body, because here's where I'm going to have my action. And for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste some stuff here, if you bear with me, just so you don't have to suffer through my tedious typing. I'm going to do a Control-C, and I'm going to come back over here and do a Control-V. And now what I have is a heading. I'm going to get rid of this ID for this button here, okay? And I'm going to get rid of this ID for this button here for now. As a matter of fact, I'll just get rid of this button, okay, like that. So what I've got here now in the body, these are now display elements. I have for the heading, this is a heading, this is a paragraph, this is another paragraph, and this is a hide it button, whatever that means, but we'll find out. And what I want to do now is I want to close off the body, and I want to close off the HTML. This, of course, is the root element because it has no parent. So let's see what this looks like. I'm going to come up here to File, and I'm going to save this. And I'm going to double-click on this example, and let me bring this down, and let me close this in here, okay? So that's what the results look like. Let's see if it makes sense from what I have here for the document. Let's see if the page, this is the page right here that you're looking at, okay? This is what the results is from the browser, and this right here, what you see below it, this is the document that gives those instructions to the browser. So there's the web page, and here is the web document. So it says this is a heading. Yep, this is a heading. And H1 means display it as large as you can. And here's 2 paragraphs. All right, now for the big deal, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a jQuery script. And in order to save you from the embarrassment of me mistyping it, I'm going to do a copy paste, and I'll explain what I've done. Here's what I've done. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to put button. And let's see if this makes sense. I'm going to come back up here, staying on the screen. All right. What I've done here is I've called the jQuery library. So that's now part of this document when I execute it. I now have another script element because I need to put all my jQuery stuff inside the script element. This tells the web browser, says, hey, dude, what follows now is script. It says, okay, cool. It's not HTML. Now, when it sees the $sign, it says, oh, this is jQuery, and yep, there's the library. So this is document ready function. Remember, we talked about that. We need the document ready function there because we don't want this to happen until the document's ready. Now, look what it's calling as the element. It's calling a button. Well, do I have a button element anywhere in the body? Yes, I do. There it is, button. That's the element name. So it's using the element name. Okay, so here's what happens. It says, when you click on it, I want another function. And this is the element that I want to do something with, which is the paragraph element. Oh, I've got two paragraph elements here, don't I? Hey, this is just like CSS. And what I want to have happen to it is I want them to be hidden. I want to hide them. I say, okay. So in other words, when I click on this button, these two paragraph elements will be hidden. And you might say, well, that's not a big deal. I know, but I needed to show you a simple example to get it going. All right, now staying on the screen there, let's see if I messed up. And of course, if I mess up, we just edit this out and you never know it. Okay, so anyway, let me save it, and then I'm going to come over here and refresh this. And there's the two paragraphs. We're going to click on this button, and it hid them. Hooray, it worked. Okay, now supposing instead what I wanted to do is I'm going to use the button, but instead of hiding this paragraph element, I wanted it to hide the H2 element. So here's H2. I'm going to do a Control-S to save it. So now what I've done is I want the H2 element to be hidden, not the paragraph elements. So I'm going to come over here and do a refresh, and let's see if it hides just the H1 element, or the H2 one. Yes, it does. It selected that one. Hey, so far so good. Okay, now let's say that what I wanted to do is I just wanted it to hide the second paragraph and not the first paragraph. Like, I just wanted to hide this paragraph here. How would I do that? Well, one way I could do it is I could put an ID selector in here. ID is equal to, and what I need here is, let me call it P2 for paragraph 2. Now, in order to select this one, what I need to do here, this is no longer going to be H2. This is going to be # because it means ID, P2, right, for paragraph 2. Okay, let's see if that works now. I'm going to save this. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to refresh it. And only hid paragraph 2. Ah, so far so good. All right, so let's try a class selector. I'm going to make a class here for H2, and I'll call it my stuff. And I'm also going to make a class here. I'm going to take out the ID selector here. I'm also going to make a class in the second paragraph and make it the same class name. Now, since both of these have the same class name, if I select that class, the H2 element will disappear, and the second paragraph will disappear. So up here, I have to tell it this is a class. And how do I do it? I do it with a dot. Okay, remember that? Now my stuff. Control-S to save it. I come here, and I'm going to refresh it. Let's see what it does now. It just hid. It didn't hide the second paragraph. It just hid the H2 element, and it hid the second paragraph as it's supposed to. What I could do now is I can make a show button. And how do I do that? Well, I could do it the same way. I'm going to take this. I'm going to do a Control-C to copy it. I'm going to do a Control-V to paste it. And I'll call this one Show It. Now, the problem with this is I have two elements that have the same name, button, and I have to use button. If I don't use button, it won't show a button. Like, let me show you what I mean. Control S to save it. I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to refresh it. There's a button, hide it, and there's one, show it. So how can I distinguish between the two buttons? I can use an ID, right? An ID attribute. So I'm going to call this B1 for button 1, and I will call this ID equals to B2 for button 2. And then what I need to do is I need to make another one of these jQuery thingies. I'm going to come right up here, do a Control C to copy it. Come down here, do a Control V to paste it. Now, what I want is I want that when I hit button 1, which has an ID of B1, it will hide it. When I hit button 2, which has an ID of B2, it will show it. So what I need to do up here, instead of having button, I need to have # B1. Why? Because that is an ID. That's how I'm identifying that element. And for this button here, I need to use the ID identifier of #, right? B2. And then for this one up here, I had, what I'm going to do is hide it. So this one here, what do you think I want it to do? I want it to show it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save it and keep my fingers crossed and hope that this works. I'm going to refresh this. Okay, I'm going to hide it. I'm going to show it. I'm going to hide it. I'm going to show it. Okay, let's go back on the board here. Okay, so hopefully we have an idea and appreciation of what jQuery is. I realize this lecture was quite extensive, but jQuery is such an important feature to have in any kind of HTML5 web document. Okay, that's it for this lecture. Thank you very much for attending.